Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Vocal Arts. I am here with Eli Jacobson. Eli, please tell the people a bit about yourself and what you do.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Honored to be here. My name's Eli Jacobson. I'm with resident tenor with VoicePlay, Acapella group, and a bunch of nerds and content creators on the internet. Yeah.
Fantastic, man. Beautiful elevator pitch.
Thank you. Yeah, I practiced it 100 times. I promise. I did not.
So the most recent thing I've seen from VoicePlay, I just did a full first-time reaction and analysis for "Heavy Is the Crown," which is one of my favorite songs from 2024. I mean, I love Linkin Park. I love Arcane. Like, that is some of my favorite music that has come out, ever, probably. So tell me about that project. How did that project come together?
Well, we had done My Enemy originally with Alexa, which was a fun project. And once season 2 came out of Arcane, I'm a huge fan of Arcane, of the music, of the fact that they support the animation so much with music, thematically, message wise. I think it's just great interstitial storytelling and sometimes very direct storytelling. And so Lane and I had spoken about wanting to revisit that music, and there were 2 songs that were high on the list, and we went back and forth, and I actually had done a whole arrangement for The Line, which is
so good.
Not to spoil anything, but it's one of the towards the end. It's not the very last episode, but it's towards the end of the series. And it's such a good song. And hearing, I can't think of his name, the lead singer for 21 Pilots, speak about the song and his experience with his family.
Is it Tyler?
I think it might be. Yes. Okay. Yeah, that rings a bell. Yes. And hearing him speak about that song just really resonated with me. And so I took that as the project, right? And I'm the one who suggested "Heavy Is the Crown," and Lane sort of looked at it and he said, "Man," he's like, "I just think we should do this song. I think we should do this song." And I was like, "Well, let's just you go arrange that one. I'll finish The Line, and let's just meet back in the center and see what kind of opportunity we have for a video." Mm-hmm. And when Patty Cake was kind of making use of some of the their castle sort of interior set, and it was already kind of partly up and I could see what to do. Plus the energy of that song was just undeniable, and and so it felt like the river was flowing in that direction. And I'm not one to fight the current when it comes to creativity. I think you got to go with it, especially when you're collaborating. And that's how we kind of got there, and we had a great love for both of the songs. A note about that, though, was my first, when watching the series, the first way that they use "Heavy Is the Crown" is sort of in a mysterious, slower kind of way, and I really loved that. It was really impactful to me, the way that they used that. And so I brought it up to him. I said, "It's fine if you do it, but don't only do the fast version. We have to find some way to blend those 2 vibes together in order to make it and be able to make it our own thing." Those were kind of the notes that we had between us a little bit.
So "Heavy Is the Crown," I mean, that to me seemed like a kind of a much more ambitious choice to go for a cappella. The Line seems like it might have been perhaps an easier thing to pull off vocally. I mean, following like Emily Armstrong's vocals, which you kind of had to take the lion's share of that on "Heavy Is the Crown." But what were the kind of final considerations that you guys went through for choosing those songs? What did you find when you explored those 2 options?
Well, there was a collective energy and sort of like, oh, this kind of reminds me of when we did Valhalla Calling, or this kind of reminds me of the energy of that. And maybe, we really felt like we wanted to revisit sort of that energy, but we haven't had kind of the same, like, I wouldn't say there has been anything that is similar or one-to-one in that way, right? I don't even know that this is necessarily a one-to-one, but there were notes and energies that were hearkening to that for us, and I think we wanted to give that a try. And I think to some extent, I think we did consider the audience and going, they probably would maybe hopefully enjoy, that from us again. Mm-hmm. And by no means were we like getting rid of the line. We decided to do a mini version of it, and it's in our back pocket should we ever want to revisit the stuff. And I certainly love that song, and I regardless of anyone gets to hear the whole thing, I appreciated the puzzle of working on that project and doing that as a just for myself,
yeah,
so
of course.
Yeah,
I loved what you guys did with Heavy as the Crown. I thought like all the artistic choices and arrangement choices you made were really smart to kind of take, like, I think doing like that level of hard rock, if you try to just turn that 1-to-1 into acapella, it's a really hard thing to get to translate fully. And again, like the super heavy harsh vocals from Emily, that's like a tough thing to pull off if you're trying to do the kind of mimic version. So I love that you guys, you took the kind of atmospheric show version, which is so cool. The people that know about that, like, that's awesome. And then like Jay Nunn's rapping is way lower than Mike's in his vocal range. And then there were all these incredible vocal stacking things that were really not, you guys made chord progressions that were not in the original song as well. So I really loved the artistic choices you guys made with it.
Thank you, man. Thank you. That's some of that risk that, you take whenever you're trying to just put your own emotion into it, your own stamp on it, and try to find something. We kind of have a rule. It has been spoken, but it also is now kind of unspoken, is that if you're doing something that is 1-to-1 to the original, then maybe just let the original be the original, mm-hmm. Pay respect, like much respect, especially if you're doing a classic song that's beloved by many. There are certain things I always say you have to love on the original, but then do your own thing, Totally. And if you don't love it, then kind of why are you doing it a little bit? But sometimes you do things and you go, I think another challenge is to say, I don't love this original, it's fine or whatever, but can I make it something that I do love,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And that's also another puzzle or challenge, I think, that we go through. And the guys could probably speak to their own experiences doing that, but some of those things have been spoken between us, and some of it's just kind of, I think, understood, between us.
Definitely. Yeah. So if you arranged the line, how much arranging are you doing for the group these days? Less
than Lane and Jeff.
Okay.
But I enjoy it. I'm not as fast or proficient as they are. At least I don't feel that confidence that they do. I mean, I have I always, if we're a sports team, I think I've said recently that, it's like they're Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan almost, right? In the old Bulls, if anyone knows that team,
Go watch The Last Dance, everyone, if you haven't.
Yeah, exactly. and or sometimes I'll say, like, if they're if they're the brain, or like they're the arms and the legs maybe, and Caesar, I don't know, they're the brain and Caesar's the heart. I'm like the sympathetic nervous system, like getting away from danger, just trying to think about the things that they're not thinking about,
Sure.
Not to get too esoteric or weird about that, but I guess what I'm saying is, like, I definitely find myself trying things that they go, I don't understand this, like sometimes. And I've learned to take those notes and come back to the middle a little bit. And that process is, it's hard for me, is the truth. Like arranging is something that I love, and I think is the reason why I lost all my hair at the same time. Right.
I understand.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a great puzzle, but it's sometimes a difficult puzzle to get right, and the first time you solve it, it's like if you say all these pieces went together, and then someone said, yeah, but they didn't go together quite right, and you go back and you look at it and you go, oh, that puzzle piece maybe isn't exactly what I thought it was. I have to pick it up and put it over here, or adjust it in some way so it's real and true,
Yeah. It's amazing too how just a few elements in an arrangement can make all the difference.
Yes.
And I'm producing a lot of original music now. Finally getting into original music. And the other day I had everything I needed for the song laid out, all the like specific drum loops picked out, and all the samples and all the chord progressions and everything. And then it was like a full day of just like trying slightly different guitar patterns and slightly different articulations on things, until finally it goes from kind of being like a mess with almost the same elements in there being like, oh, this is exactly what I was aiming for.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome that you're taking the foray into original music, which is its own, it's its own puzzle. Like it's different than simply just arranging. You're writing, and you also have that like that gut check of like, this is 100% me. Like, so I want to communicate that. Good for you.
Absolutely.
For doing that, man.
Has VoicePlay ever considered getting into original music?
Yes. Back in the day, we had some original music as 4 to 5, right?
Okay.
And I've done original music in the past, as well as just actually it was under the name Eli Black, which is a whole other story.
Okay. Save that for later.
Yeah. And and then so VoicePlay really kind of focused on the show being its original thing, and the way that it does covers being its like original kind of concept. We have worked on original music, and it hasn't quite made it to the surface. I think that it will. I think at some point, I think something will kind of resonate with what we want to do or try at the time. It's an interesting effort when you consider we wear multiple hats, right? We kind of wear, because we don't have a management team or a business team that largely, we have some partners that help us in that way, but we're largely the producers, artists, managers, the whole thing, right? And so you take off the one hat and you wear the other, and you say, well, the business, to keep the business flowing and everybody kind of working, and the being able to pay the bills, and the camera guys and the people behind the scenes and all that stuff, you kind of go, if we make good decisions on covers, then we know that that's a known quantity for us, right?
Sure.
And I think that there was some, at least I thought, was like, well, at least if we get to a certain level of viewership and listenership and have some expectations there, then we can kind of maybe quantify like what happens if half the people listen or something, or half the people watch, and at least I think we're getting to that point where we'd be able to have sort of the gut check of like the safety to do it from a business stance, and then maybe even be able to say, you know what, this is something that we would do whether anyone watched or not. Like we can have a little bit of the creative freedom to say, this is what we want to do.
Yeah. I'm sure some people would watch. I would watch.
Well, I'm honored that you'd say it, man. Like, sometimes people go, I don't know what that song is. I can't wait till they do, this specific tune by this other artist. And that's totally fine with us. Like we like that, but, hey man, it'll be something we'll discover together.
Yeah, definitely. And always going to be acapella, you think? I mean, that's been how the group is for so long.
So, you know what though? I'll tell you what, we performed last year in November with Chicago, like the Chicago, right? Which was by like a dream situation, right? Like with the other friends that they had lined up in that, between Robin Thicke and Robert Randolph and Steve Vai, awesome. Judith Hill. It was an amazing lineup. And that was so fantastic, and kind of our first time performing and arranging, because we arranged the music to go with what Chicago was planning to do a little bit. So we did it separately from each other, but with some planning in mind there, right? And we came together and did that, and it was really such a good experience. We always want to wear, if we're music first, we're probably a cappella first, but I would never like want to say that we would never do something that's vocal heavy, but has maybe some instrumental pieces. Obviously we've used a violin in Nothing Else Matters, and
Sure.
some things have happened there. So I wouldn't want to say that we would never include an instrument, but we're always going to be a cappella first, I think, or vocal first, certainly.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Where did your background and training start? I mean, I know you've been with VoicePlay, or at the time 4 to 5, for a long time, but kind of where did your musical journey begin?
That's a really good question, and it's a long story, so I'm going to abridge it a little bit.
Perfect.
But no, I would say that the first time I ever sang, where like people close to me were like, "Okay, you're allowed to continue singing," was probably for my bar mitzvah. If I'm just being completely transparent, like I did, middle school chorus. And, I think my teachers really liked, like they gave me a role that was, it's probably some of the first places I dealt with like electronics and mixing consoles and things like that. They allowed me to do that a bit. And, but kind of zooming up, a lot of my professional training, I really was interested in going to school for something creative, but I ended up not doing that because I was working professionally. And because there was such a groundswell of pop music in Orlando at the time, I got to work in studios as sort of a demo vocalist and somebody kind of over here who could work behind the producer, kind of sit on the couch and then be like, hey, one of my good friends and he's a mentor, he's like a big brother to me, Rod Wilson, who is an amazing, he goes by Rod Maurice sometimes. He's an amazing producer and just a bomb vocalist, like just an amazing vocalist. And so I picked up a lot from him. I emulated him. And I say this almost every interview that I talk about it. He was the guy who said, hey, you're really good, but if you do a few things, you're going to be a lot better and I'll be able to work with you more. Are you going to listen to me or are you not going to listen to me, kind of thing? And I was like, I will listen to you. And so he literally gave me a list of like artists that he said, you have to go and get these CDs at the time. And you got to listen to them. And by emulating these singers, I will be able to communicate with you better. I'll be able to say, like Donny Hathaway does this on this song, I'd like you to take that spirit, but maybe not that texture, Mm-hmm. And so he really did a good thing by helping me to be a much more versatile singer and learn about emulation as a way to expound my abilities,
Awesome. That's such a unique approach, really, to emulate, because you can run into trouble if you don't have the skill or if you try to kind of emulate in the wrong way. In my world of opera, that happens to young singers all the time. You'll hear a very kind of matured, fully fledged out professional opera singer when you're an undergrad and you try to sound like them and you have to do some unhealthy things to sound like them to kind of fake that more mature sound. And
there's an intensity to that too, right? Volume and resonance and such that people would try to get to that could be incredibly damaging if they're not coming from the right place, right? Mm-hmm. And I was very fortunate that I made some, like, I don't know if you call it the brain to voice coordination sort of steps early in my career / education. I did have a few instances where I was able to work with professional vocal coaches, mm-hmm. Just from proximity or being in the studio and asking them questions. And Rod was really well trained, so he could answer questions like that. And working in the studio with other artists, they had vocal coaches, mm-hmm. that I could pick their brain. I'd be like, oh, that's interesting. Then he said that. Let me think about that. I once dated an opera singer who,
no way,
she had some things to say, about it. She Stetson University and,
okay.
And so, I listen, I think information comes from everywhere, whether the people are older than you, younger than you, from the same discipline of music or otherwise. I think you can absorb so much from people,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So how has your voice developed since then? What kind of changes has it gone through?
I largely aimed to be a soul vocalist that loved rock and roll, right? I wanted to be like an R&B, like I loved Boys to Men it back in the day. I loved Brandy, you know, and I really enjoyed those singers, but my parents listened to like the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and other things. You know, Rod introduced me to like gospel vocalists that I was like, these people are just amazing singers, right?
Totally.
And some of that led me to different textures that actually helped in the rock and roll. And I could almost imagine, you know, I don't know that this is probably is documented. Like I could almost imagine that that's where some of these classic rock singers, you know, got their inspiration from in some capacity. And so I thought, you know, if you go back to those eras and sort of like understand other vocalists of the time or just prior to that, and you sort of like really pay attention to what was going on both in recording but also in what vocalists were doing, then maybe you can just take a sliver of that with you, you know. And so I think that it's changed from being something that was a pure emulation to growing into something. And honestly, my confidence with having like a distortion at the high on some of the high register, that comes from being in a band, you know, and working at a high volume and blowing your voice out and saying, I can't do this anymore, and buying in-ear monitors so you can hear everything incredibly intimate and detailed, turning the volume of the band way down, you know, and being able to hone in on what your voice is doing. It comes from editing my own vocals and listening to them stark and bare and, you know, out of tune sometimes, and going, oh, let's try again. Or if I'm going to make the adjustment because this is a produced thing in a tuning way or something, then was the feel there? Am I preserving the feel, you know? So it's all these like internal monologues that have been happening for a long time at this point that have evolved my voice, I think.
Awesome. And how do you do any intentional training to your voice these days, or do you get most of the training through recording and performing?
I've kind of gone back to that since we're not on the road as much as we were. And I know it may sound counterintuitive, but you know, we're in some respects, you know, I always said like guys that were like rock singers that had a particular voice, like even Led Zeppelin, you know, like, or
Steven Tyler.
Any of the lead singers from Linkin Park, for example, or you know, you kind of commit to what that voice is, you know, and but if you got to be careful, or else you kind of end up with some of Steve Perry's issues, you know, from Journey, you know, and so we're somewhere blended between kind of lifestyle, willing to stretch and take a couple of risks, you know, and go, all right, you know, I get scoped, you know, every few years, I would say at least, just to check to make sure that some of the adjustments and things that I'm trying are, you know, you got to take that trip to the pit lane and let those professionals take a look at you a little bit. But I'll take some risks in that way. And, you know, I like to, you know, if I'm going to warm up before like recording or something like that, I'll like yawn on pitch, you know, like from a high swoop, you know, down. I do that quite a lot. I will be very careful and cautious about the areas that I go and speak in. I don't like to be in loud environments and talk over that. But I don't have like a coach that I go to regularly. I actually would like to maybe have those conversations with other singers and like maybe have more of a, I don't know. That's a good idea. Like maybe like a mastermind group of like, what are you doing? Like, what are you working on? What's your regiment right now? You know, I don't really do that a lot.
Yeah, you can definitely get a lot. I mean, if you can find some singers, especially with maybe similar voice types as you, or voices do similar things. But like you said, you really can learn. You can learn from anybody if you're open to it. It's
true. I spent a lot of time thinking about how to maintain the higher register, right? Because I would say that over time, my register, I can hit more confidently higher notes now, more strongly, you know, certainly stronger than I could when I was younger, which I think most of the other singers that I've spoken with have said the opposite, and while I do find that I can hit lower notes as well, particularly if I'm not warmed up, like right now I'm warmed up to a higher register. It always happens with talking,
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe not for you because of where you place your voice when speaking. It's smart decision, right?
Yeah, good for bass.
Yeah, exactly. But my job is largely to hit the higher notes, right, strongly. So I kind of plan that into my life a little bit. But if you get me fresh or on certain days, I'm down there with Jeff a little bit.
That's like wild.
Not on his lowest notes, but it's pretty low actually.
That's wild. And just a quick to jump in. Is that something that's new, or have you always had low notes for a tenor?
I've always had I always said I'm a tenor 2 with a large range, but I got placed at tenor 1 so very much, But when I was like starting out in professional performance and acapella and like in theme parks and conventions and even studios, as a vocalist, it was really like whatever was needed, I would give it the good old college try, and for better or for worse, I learned how to access those areas and where my brain to vocal coordination kind of took me there a little bit.
Yeah. How do you think about connecting your upper full chest range with your mixed belting that we hear in VoicePlay? For example, we can take Heavy as the Crown because I think you're sitting on like a bunch of high A's and B's maybe, and then you go up to like a high D at some point. How do you navigate like that part of the range? Intentionally,
for certain. There is a place where it used to only be my falsetto. I didn't have the skill set to think of it kind of, almost in a mask sort of scenario, like, and to be able to pinch or control the texture, to bring it in a little bit. But then there's also that place where I'm accessing a bit of that distortion that helps me to bring back some texture at a higher register. That kind of amalgams that blend of those voices a little bit, or that way of thinking about it. I hope that's clear. I think probably singers who have tried this will understand what I mean, but maybe for people out there who aren't singers or don't really understand this, might be a little out of reach.
Yeah.
But it's not. I used to make a joke and say like, yeah, singing is like organized yelling. You know what I mean? and but to the to the academic, that like would make a lot of people cringe and go, don't say that, But
I say opera is healthy yelling.
Yeah, healthy yelling.
Yelling, yeah.
But it's like, it's because some of the same things that you're accessing have to be the same. The difference is we're just trying to do it in the most efficient and intentional way possible. And so, if you grew up in a loud household like I did, where people would talk to you from the other room, you started to you heard that, you would go, that wasn't so strange for you, to do things at a loud volume. And I think we just go, oh, that wasn't so good for me, I should do that differently.
So to piggyback off what you're saying, it sounds like when you maybe release weight from your voice, when you get up high enough, you can then add a little bit of grit or distortion to kind of bring back some texture and interest that maybe you have at the very top of that really yelly range.
Yeah.
But that kind of goes away when you get into that other place.
Yeah. And probably before I would think of texture, I would think about how high can I talk, right?
Okay.
I would think about how high can I, without like just a straight falsetto, how high can I actually, and I'm not going to do it, it'll probably distort the
it will, yeah, for sure.
But how high can I actually, speak or healthy yell, to bring more of that, that voice, as you traditionally think of it, more of that speaking voice into the blend. And then once I know where that is and it feels good, then I can maybe start thinking about texture. And then or like distortion texture. And then honestly, as you get more proficient at doing that, you're not thinking about that. You're just sort of doing all that at one time.
Sure.
You know?
Sure. So at some point it was, you want to make sure you can operate cleanly before you introduce any kind of distortion to it.
Yeah. Especially when you're doing a lot of shows,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you're like, well, how I would sweat, you know, like a little bit. I would be like, how am I going to hit that like consistently live for like 60 days in a row?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like how am I going to do that on like less sleep than is necessary? Can't talk. If we do have a day off, I say in a row, but like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
essentially not home for that,
Mm-hmm.
that long, you know, you would really start to think about like planning that, or it's like, you know what, I'm just going to false that in this live show, or I'm going to rearrange this. I'm going to have we say always like, always like good live performance have an exit strategy,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so we always have one or two plan Bs, you know, plan B, plan C. Kind of the same thing. Like the first time that I was really able to hit some of these notes, you know, maybe if I listen to it, it's not, you know, the best that I feel like I could have done, you know, certainly not the best I did in rehearsal, let's say. You know, the Chicago show would be some of the first times that I did that in an acapella group at that level, right? Usually there's a little bit more like you're blending into the energy of guitars and band and things like that, right?
Right.
And so being kind of raw with an acapella group, the Chicago show would have been one of the first times that I accessed some of those places in a live setting, because it was also like the first time we performed live in years at this point.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about tour. I mean, that sounds like an awesome experience. I mean, what were some of the big highlights and maybe some other challenges that you faced while on tour?
Oh man, like, you know, when you start out a touring business on your own, you're driving, you know, like we were in Sprinter vans driving America, you know, and you know, we did do some like we had a fly to business a little bit too, so you could go for like a day or two or a few days, or go and pick up a rental and go to another place. We've done that as well, like but we did a large amount of dates right in a row, and we did that twice, kind of the whole United States almost, in Sprinter vans with our own gear like in the back. And some of those were incredibly rewarding times, but there was also like, it's your turn. It's you and Jeff Castellucci, you know, in the front of a Sprinter van. I'm driving. We're on a mountain somewhere that you can't see anything. And there are semis coming at you, you know, on the other lane, and you're driving up the switchback, you know, me. And every time the lights come at you, it's just you and Jeff going, like you see your life literally flash before your eyes every time it happens. So that's one hilarious, but also sort of true, incredibly true, like thing that was a hard thing and also a good memory. Mm-hmm. You know, but being on tour with Home Free and you know, Street Corner Symphony, kind of anchoring the Sing Off tour, you know, every time it happened, was a pretty cool thing. It was a different challenge because now you know, you're learning to live in tight quarters with other people, like in your rolling dormitory a little bit. But luckily everybody was just such a good community in acapella. I've been on tour with bands before, and it's not always as logical and talked out, and you know, dealing with your differences in an intellectual kind of way, and telling and expressing your feelings. You know, I'm not to say that nobody ever got emotional or exploded or something like that, but for the most part, man, like acapella is not a community of like, you have to, if you like us, then you can't like them. You know, everybody's really on the same team to some extent. And if not, if someone's listening out there and you don't feel that way, get on board, because it's way better on this side, you know? I really mean it. I've been on both sides of this, and this is better. I promise.
100%. The sing off was actually a big topic I wanted to to
Please.
ask you about. So I would love to just hear how VoicePlay got involved and then what it was like being on the show. I mean, being in front of that kind of viewership.
It was cool. It was its own. So I went into it personally going, I don't intend, or I don't, we weren't really these really competitive, like, oh, we're going to win, like that's not, and I don't think really, to kind of hearken to the acapella talk about the community, like I think everyone has a bit of competition. That's good. Like healthy competition's good. Mm-hmm. But I didn't feel like anybody was like, like other reality shows, people are like making moves and stuff like that. I didn't really feel like that's what it was. Like, even when you're losing, you have to work together, in acapella, and so for me, I went into it thinking about learning how Hollywood production works, seeing people build sets like that, and like the best Steadicam guys in the world, and working a little more closely with Deke Sharon, and we got to know Ben Bram and Rob Dietz really well, and other people on that team that were amazing. I'm not going to get all the names right, or remember to mention everybody, but some of those folks we've done plenty of work with after that, and so really the connection of meeting people in the industry and that wanted to take acapella further was one of the best things about that experience. One of the hardest things about that experience was that it is TV. Everything is, it's television. There's a hierarchy to decision making, and if you can kind of like understand that, then you're able to maybe like separate the emotional part of that journey from the learning experience that it is.
Yeah, you just let the chips fall. Do your best and let the chips fall.
Now, for us, it was lucky that we had already begun building a YouTube channel at that time, right? We'd already begun doing that process. We already had been on tour. We already were doing this. It had already started turning from purely a marketing investment into something that was maybe going to help us pay some bills, And so what we did was we went in and said, let's find all of the voices that we'd like to work with after this, like whether anybody would watch or not. Let's just find the people that we want to know and we want to work with after. And in the period of time between filming the sing-off and the sing-off being aired, we filmed as many music videos with all of those people as we could. So every time there was going to be a feature of that person, we knew that this is the episode where, VJ is going to do something great. Let's release something with the Philharmonic for that, or let's do something with Home Free, or let's do something. There was we were able to try our best at planning our own sort of PR and marketing effort that went along with the creativity that we had based on that experience.
That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Appreciate that.
And going into it, I mean, how much did this sing off really launch you guys to from one level to a much higher level?
Yeah, it was helpful. There was more traction to the channel. I think between that and a couple sing off tours, us being able to be included in that, there's different ways that we thought about it. We were like, well, I don't know, like if we go on tour, then we're not making as much content. We're not building our own tour business there, but it's kind of baked in. Are we able to come to terms? Like, we'll be able to perform in some venues that we really like. I always wanted, I don't know if you see this back here, that's from the Ryman in Nashville.
Yeah. Awesome.
It's a hatch print, from the Ryman Nashville from Sing Off Tour #1.
Okay.
Super cool. That was like a dream scenario for me a little bit. So there were some amazing moments, and I'll say like getting a couple of standing ovations in the Ryman is like, it's there are a couple things that have happened that I've been like, this is about like, this is a big bucket list check off, for me.
Yeah.
So sorry, I don't know if I veered there a little bit for you, but
no worries.
But I think that it was good for us for certain in all the ways. We learned a lot, that we got a little bit more eyeballs, and I think we learned how to get more eyeballs at the same time, you know, and it gave us the opportunity to do more than what we were already doing. I think, like, more quickly.
What year were you guys on the show again, or years?
So I think it was actually 10 years ago, as of 24. Well, let me think about that. What was it? 10 years ago?
2014, 2013.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
I think the show ran like I want to say 2011 to 2014. It's like 4 seasons.
Yeah, we were the second to last season that aired, I think. And I think there was a break in between. So the Pentatonics had the great distinction, and again, this is one of those fortuitous things for them, that maybe I think that they were always going to be as huge as they are. I think that they're incredibly talented. They were the right age at the right time with the right stuff going on. But I think that the sing-off distinction of having been the winners of the sing-off with the most airtime of a group, with the largest audiences watching the show, and being uncontested because the show didn't air the next year, was all really good stuff for them. And the advent of like viral hits on YouTube were all at their like peak, and they had a really smart, and I think I understand, the really good for them management team that helped them navigate that sort of thing. And again, like, their talent can't be understated. Like, they're incredibly talented people.
Didn't Pitch Perfect also come out?
Yeah. There was a lot of acapella
around that time.
You know, it was a good searchable thing, right?
Yeah.
And you know what? Good for them. They've done a lot to further all of our careers in acapella.
Totally.
And you know, I was on like doing guest entertainment stuff with VoicePlay on cruise ships. I think people were walking up, have you heard of the Pentatonics? You know, like, if you watching the sing off? And I was like, oh yeah, I kind of watch it, you know, like here and there. You know, but we had some exposure years before the sing off to like Nick Lachey. We had done show with at SeaWorld with 98 Degrees. You know, there was Sam Wiseman, I think, had knowledge of us through other things. He was obviously an acapella fan, which is why he helped to create the show. I don't know if you know, he's like the director of like the Mighty Ducks and other Disney films. And he began like helping to produce TV for you know, including the sing off. You know, these are really like accomplished people that got in the corner of acapella at that time, and I think we're all the better for it, honestly. Yeah.
It seems like you guys also went through a big growth phase at the start of the pandemic.
Yeah.
At least I mean, that's when I so I was in acapella in college, and I had joined a group also kind of right after that wave, like when Pitch Perfect had come out. I think I joined a year or two after. And so acapella was really popular for the college groups too at the time. There's that big rush. But so that's when I was in acapella, but I didn't really listen to groups outside of the college world. So I really kind of discovered acapella again through you guys and through Pentatonics, but all after the pandemic had hit. And it seemed like at that time, I mean, you guys are putting out some absolutely huge videos on YouTube.
Well, thanks for remembering that. You know, and for recognizing. So yeah, we did. That was a moment for us. That was one of those things of like, it's a lot of things are out of our control. The economics of doing show, not only were people like disallowing us from doing shows, or the pandemic was disallowing us from doing shows, but when shows were beginning to come back, the economics were not good for us, right? And so we took the approach of like, well, let's just see. We had already had the thought of whether or not, you know, I think, you know, Lane and Jeff had started families. They had a you know, a pure, like an honorable reason for wanting to like stay at home more. And so we had like, it had been a topic of conversation. Like, how do we maybe do less of this and more of this? Or can we grow the the community and figure that out. And so the pandemic hit, and it was a conversation between us. Jeff was, like, hey, I'm going to start some things. I was unable to start my, like a channel and do things like that at the time. I had some family things and some really close friends, that got hit, that suffered from the pandemic, and a lot of responsibility that fell, to me a bit in that situation, to my family. And so I kind of leaned into that, but thankful that the group and our business leaned into the community and creating content online and seeing if we could pivot sort of the business expense profile from a touring business to an internet content, largely creative business in that way. And just, we're blessed that it worked. We're thankful that there was an audience there to catch us. And people like yourself sharing and analyzing and really helping to get that out there, so yes, thank you. It was a terrible dark time, and also presented some really interesting opportunities. I mean, no pandemic, I would just be doing opera now, and wouldn't have the YouTube channel, wouldn't have the podcast, wouldn't have the bass gang, the original music, like none of it. So it's really interesting to reflect, because I remember how scary and how dark it was, and just the chaos about it, and then just to look back and be like, oh well, some good things did come of that time if you kind of grab the bull by the horns. It really is that necessity is the mother of invention, right? Like it's just like the need to do something creative, or the need to find a different income and to pivot, or to see how you can grow in a different direction. And there's plenty of things that people around me, or that we tried, even that was like, okay, maybe not that, like that didn't pan out so well, and that happened in shows. So we were used to like bombing and like it never feels great, but you also have to just embrace it and go like, this is who is literally could be a stand-up comedian because of how much he loves to bomb, is Jeff Castellucci.
Seriously.
He has such a good energy when it comes to like sitting in the awkward moment, like he really does. I can't say enough about his comfort on stage, and
that's awesome.
His ability to be transparent. I always love being on stage and talking aside, like next to him, like bantering next with him in that way. Like it's I feel like I can always set him up, and he knows how to just knock it down.
My brother has gone into a little bit of a foray of doing open mics for comedy.
Oh yeah,
just for fun. He's like a landscape designer, but he's like,
awesome.
He loves comedy. And I just have so much, because he'll send me, recordings of him doing it. And it's just him doing his, 5-minute bit to a room of 7 people, and no one's giving him any feedback. And I'm like, man, to be able to just sit in that and be fine with it. Like it's something he has that I didn't get. I didn't get that gene.
I'm upset. I'm kind of obsessed with it. Like seeing other people do it. Like it's the truth. Like because the feedback, if it's no feedback, that's feedback. You know what I mean? Like if in that situation, it's a little, it's not binary, but like it's a little bit like, did they laugh? They didn't. Did they groan? So there's a couple of things that you can measure there, but I've definitely told my fair share of jokes on stage that didn't go well, and and
just go hide behind Jeff.
Yeah, I think I heard Chappelle say, it's like, every musician, every lead singer wants to be a stand-up comedian, and every comedian wants to be a lead singer of a band.
That's funny.
I couldn't agree more.
That's so funny. Yeah, he said it's usually just a group of other local comics and a few people at the bar who are going to be like, are often too drunk and being loud, and then this group of other comics that are like going to be a little jaded if you're doing well.
Yes.
So you just get a lot of like shade from comics, and then a couple drunk people at the bar, and that's like,
you have to recalibrate. The shade is like positive feedback.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right.
Being in a like early days in a rock band was a little like that.
Okay.
Like lead singer wise, like.
Oh, tell me about that. Yeah, tell me about your some of your non-acapella musical journey.
Yeah. So kind of parallel paths almost a little bit. When I was in high school in an acapella group, kind of in a neighboring high school to the guys, I wanted to be in a rock band and couldn't really find anyone to practice with and such. So when I got into the professional world, at the adult world, I found some guys that were slightly older than I was that were like, hey man, you want to try this out, or I got up on stage with people. Actually, Kathy Castellucci was a front person for a band. And
no way.
Yeah, totally. And
awesome.
And I sat in with them some and would work with her band sometimes, or other friends that had bands. And I met some of the players in that scenario. And, whenever I'd see them out, they'd be like, hey, get this guy up. And I would go up and sing. And at some point it just kind of resonated with me that I felt like I should probably go ahead and allow myself to be pulled into that world a little bit. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would sometimes, even when I was on tour with VoicePlay, like if we were in New York or something like that, or we did this gig at the Bitter End even, and there would be like a jam band that was on doing open mic, band stuff at the Bitter End after we did like a showcase, there. And so I would just find myself like sitting in with bands and getting like sucked up into the city for a night, or wherever I was. And so, yeah, so like I did like original music and things like that, even before VoicePlay was VoicePlay. And I did a little bit of Southeast sort of touring with a cover band, some conventions, some private parties. And sometimes I would do like, hey, I'm singing Lenny Kravitz, and now here's my tune that sort of gives me Lenny Kravitz vibes, or that I was inspired by, to sort of do that a little bit and try to sneak it into the set to see what the feedback was. And in some instances, people just, whatever the status quo was for Lenny Kravitz, right, was sort of like if that was the same energy, then I was like, it did its thing, to me.
For sure.
I was never looking for anyone to be like, that was such an awesome song. And sometimes that would happen. And sometimes it would just be nothing. And that was good too. Versus like if people were really enjoying the music and then they were like, let's go get a drink. And be like, ooh, this was not the audience for that.
Yeah. Right. We've got a few minutes left. I would love to hear kind of like the first moments of VoicePlay getting together, or 4 to 5 at the time.
Well, okay, so we were all working in theme parks and in the convention space, working through agencies who, some were of, acapella ilk. They already had their own groups and were doing theater shows and like the Toxic Audio, Vox Audio time frame, and so we were all working together a little bit there. And I think I even would see like Lane at some studios because he had like engineering sort of experience. And
this is high school age, college age?
College age, a little after high school, let's say. Like maybe even directly after high school.
Okay.
And so I'll try to shorten the story a little bit. Basically, we were all doing these different groups in acapella, right? Some of them were like 50s groups, and I was in sort of the street corner, singing like Boys to Men, or singing a pop song, or singing the Temptations, and it was kind of that vibe. And Universal and in Japan needed a group kind of like that, so I moved to Japan and I lived there for a year doing that gig. I brought, I was working with some friends of mine from the studio stuff that I was doing. My mentor Rod, at some point the second 6 months, actually came over and did part of that contract with me. It's where we came up with some of the concepts for the original music that I did in the bands later. And when I came back from that, we were kind of back in Orlando doing the same kind of work and such. And Lane came up to me and said, hey, we have this contract on a cruise ship that's coming up for, I couldn't remember, it was like a set of weeks. We don't have a full cast. We need someone to come with us. Do you want to come with us? And I just said, yes, let's go immediately. I need to do something. Let's go,
Yeah.
And that's honestly, like, on a cruise ship environment is actually where I knew these guys, but we had like mutual, like some of my best friends went to high school with them.
Okay.
Our mutual friend Rick, who we lost actually during the pandemic. That's who we pay tribute to in Halo.
Right. Right.
I knew Scott Porter probably better than I knew Lane and Jeff, like by a lot, at that time frame. And so getting to know them really was kind of like through working in acapella groups, and getting to know their sense of humor, getting to know how Earl and Lane, worked out together, and going to the gym with them, and kind of like having those conversations, and seeing how they ate, I like this, you like that, and I would say, be like, why are you doing it that way? And then I come to find out that they liked delicious things, and we just became fast friends in that way, and so the first moments were, one of the very first moments of me working with Lane, let's say, I hope he doesn't hate that I'm sharing this story, but we were doing a holiday show in Whoville, as Who's, for the Grinchmas celebration at Universal Studios, right? My first time ever doing this. I've been thrown to the wolves. I've learned all the parts for the baritone like overnight, and I have to do this announcement, right? Like that I practice. There's like acting and scripts and stuff. And as I'm like doing the introduction, and we're going to go on stage immediately, Lane right here lets out the loudest burp that I'd ever heard in my entire life, right? And actually kind of the most creative burp that I've ever heard, which he'll have to demonstrate for you if ever. And that was like some of the first like words that I had with him, like going on stage and then performing that whole set, dying of laughter.
Yeah. Did he do it just to mess with you?
Yes,
okay.
He did. I'm almost 100% sure that that's the case. Yeah.
So how did it go from being friends to being like, hey, let's form a group and do this thing?
There were a couple different chapters, but largely I was working in bands, and I was doing big bike week, like in Biketoberfest sort of rock and roll shows, and original music over in this venue, and other clubs and things like that. And I got a phone call. He said, hey, we're thinking about taking this to the next, wanting to figure out how to take this to the next level. And I'm sort of like shortening and paraphrasing a little bit, but basically, if you could see your way, I don't want to ask you to do this, but if there's any world in where you would do less of the thing that you're doing here, not saying you have to quit it, but would do less of this stuff over here to focus more over here, we think that we would make a really good team together. Right. And that was sort of the tenor of the conversation that really, I knew them as guys that would not only talk about doing things but would do things. And I really, really admired and liked that about them. And so it was a little bit of a no-brainer for me to kind of come in and see how that was going to happen. It was still probably a year before like the name changed and we started doing things like that. But the conversations were had, the what is this going to be? Is it a theater thing? Is it like a rock band? We need to like think about what's going on in alternative music right now and be more of that a little bit. Is it some blend between those things? I mean, there were some wild names suggested, and but they all had an intention behind them, which I appreciated, even if we were like, I don't really like that name, or and I could see my way. I didn't come up with VoicePlay or anything, but I understood the idea. And I think once it became, we knew what venues we were going to be in. I think I want to give credit to Jeff on that. At least in maybe the brainchild of it a little bit, right? Or pointing out what we thought the tour that was coming up was going to be like, and understanding how that might pivot into larger venues of similar nature. And also, you know, not to say that we did this, but to say that there was like an aspiration of maybe, you know, in a dream of being able to be genre defining in some capacity, that that the name VoicePlay might give us the vision and, you know, sort of you know, long bullseye to maybe try and do that, you know?
Yeah. Awesome.
So, yeah.
I would say you guys have done really amazing and special things for the acapella world. No question.
That's really warm to hear, man. It gives me tingles to hear that from you. And I always appreciate how thoughtful you are in your assessment of things. And I don't watch every single one of your videos, but the ones that I do watch, I was like, this is a good guy, man. I think I'd get along well with him. And I think that I'd like to hear more from him. And you know, I just really hope that you could just continue to grow. And, you know, people, if you're out there and you're not subscribed, you got to subscribe to this guy. He's a good egg. Let's support good music and good assessments of music as well.
Well, thank you, Eli. The respect is so mutual. And thanks for coming on the show. If you have any final words you want to say to our listeners, please go ahead and then we'll sign off.
There's not a whole lot to say. You can, if you want to follow me sort of on the socials, I'm Eli, not Eli, or I'm Eli Notelius, sometimes what it looks like, right on Instagram. And I'm hopeful to release some new music. So, and maybe to start my own channel. So maybe keep an eye out for me there. And definitely follow VoicePlay. Come over to Patreon if you haven't. We'll treat you right, and we'll listen to your voice there as well.
They really will. Eli, great chatting with you. I appreciate you, man.
Back at you, man. Great to chat with you. Let's stay in touch, all right?
We will. Take care.
All right, man. See you.
I hope you guys enjoyed that full conversation with Eli Jacobson from VoicePlay. If you did, I'm sure you will enjoy this conversation with a much lower-voiced member of VoicePlay, Jeff Castellucci. Check it out. Go on. Click it. I know you want to.